Tonight I'll be reading a story from r/NoSleep. It's called I've Been Trapped in This Bunker for 5 years. Please, is anyone out there still alive? I was jolted back to consciousness by the sound of a blaring alarm. The airlock had been breached, and I knew exactly why. Without getting dressed, I shot out of bed and rushed towards the blast doors. There, equipped in a protective suit with only a singular can of oxygen, stood Charles. "What are you doing?" I asked through the speaker system. He turned towards the exit, ripping a quarantine sign off the door. "I'm leaving." "Charles, don't be stupid. You won't last a day. Remember Henderson?" He nodded, but kept working on the door. In a matter of minutes, he would break through the seal and leave the safety of our bunker. Truth be told, it wasn't concern for his well-being that made me want to keep him. It was rather the fear of being alone. After 4 deaths in the span of a year, we were the only 2 left. You heard the transition, David. There are people out there, a place we can live, free of these concrete walls. Maybe they've already killed the parasites. I quickly grabbed the emergency code and started initiating lockdown. I couldn't let him leave without a fight. That message was years old. Whoever sent it, they must have died ages ago. He sighed. "Don't try to stop me. This is my decision." "But you'll die," I argued futilely. He paused and turned back around to face me. He hadn't shaved in a few weeks, and his eyes looked bloodshot. We hadn't seen the light of day in years, not since the infestation started, 5 years earlier. "You remember what they said before putting us down here?" he asked. "But once the air cleared, we'd rise from our colonies together." I shook my head. Of course I remembered. We were chosen to survive the inevitable end. Yet no sooner had they sealed the doors behind us, before they fell over dead. We'd been abandoned by sentient life. "You've got to let me go," he said in a somber tone. "I don't want to be alone." "You already are." With that, he opened the door, revealing a narrow tunnel with a ladder. He'd have to climb 100 feet up to reach the surface, a trek that would diminish a significant portion of his oxygen supply. As he closed the airlock, I rushed to the surveillance room. Out of the 24 cameras we started with, only 3 remained. At least I'd get to see Charles leave the perimeter. With a sigh, I turned the cameras on. Witnessing the outside world was always a topic of dread, just remembering a time when the planet thrived with vegetation and life, only to see the barren wasteland left behind by the parasites. Without a functional portable radio to keep in touch with Charles, I could only watch as he walked away. As with all the others, I knew he'd perish. I sat back in my chair and calculated how long the supplies would last me. Dried and canned foods all meant to last a decade. Without Charles and the rest of the crew, it could keep me going for a lifetime. An hour passed, and I kept my eyes glued to the screen, waiting for Charles's return. I'd figured he'd have enough oxygen for 3 hours top. I tended to the daily maintenance tasks and started my report. Though we'd long since lost contact with High Command, we still sent updates on day-to-day occurrences. I let my mind drift, contemplating if living inside this empty prison was worth it. My train of thought was quickly interrupted by movement on the cameras. "Let me in," Charles shouted. "I can't do that, Charles. You know the rules. Please, I'm almost out of air." I could hear him struggling as the oxygen ran out. Despite his most valiant effort, he wouldn't be able to resist the temptation of removing his mask. After all, human instincts are hard to ignore. As he collapsed to the ground, he gave in and removed the mask. For a second, he seemed to regain his strength, but then the parasites got a hold of his airways, invisible little buggers, digging into his body. At first it was just a cough, but within minutes he started puking up chunks of his own guts, blood, lung tissue, whatever the creatures could get disintegrated within him. There was no cure, no discrimination. These things attacked anything from humans to animals to plants. Once food had run out on the surface, they still refused to die. Instead, they entered a dormant state, waiting for anything to disturb their slumber. "I'm sorry, Charles. I wish you hadn't left, I said as he drew his last agonized breath of tainted air. Watching my last partner die, I went into autopilot. Despite my emotions, it was just another thing to file on my daily report, a pathetic routine to keep me sane. If anyone receives this, please get me out of here. David Robert Jones, signing out, June 5th, 2025. Thank you for listening.